Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630. WMAL.
7:07 on the Morning Majority, and we have Sean Trende to talk to, senior elections analyst for RealClearPolitics. Read him all the time. And he's the author of a new book called The Lost Majority. You can check that out. How's it going, Sean?
Going great. How are you doing?
Hey, I want to ask you a little bit about, so eight votes, overwhelming win for Romney in Iowa. I want to ask you a little bit about the different strategies that Romney and Santorum took. Their votes came from very different types of places, didn't they?
Yeah, Romney did well in urban and suburban areas, the places where he was advertising heavily towards the end and got that type of vote out. Santorum, on the other hand, went kind of the traditional Iowa route. He visited all 99 counties, and I think it showed up in the fact that he did very well in rural areas, places where, they don't get a lot of presidential candidates, and a single stop can make a big difference.
Well, and what does an 8-vote win mean? They seem to both, oddly enough, have exceeded expectations, even though they finished 1 and 2.
That's right. I mean, when you have an 8-vote win, it's effectively a tie, especially when you have a state that doesn't have a recount mechanism in place. So I think both candidates can feel pretty good about the result. People had kind of written off Romney. He was not doing well as much as a month ago. In the same way, Santorum was in single digits just a few weeks ago. So both candidates had a good night.
All right, but Santorum said last night, game on. We asked the question earlier this morning. I'll ask you, is it game on or is it game over? I mean, can Mitt Romney really be stopped at this point?
Well, Mitt Romney can be stopped. The conservative candidates will have to try to coalesce around someone in South Carolina, and if Romney gets blown out in South Carolina, which is possible, then you could see a longer nomination battle. On the other hand, if Romney does well in South Carolina, it really is over.
How could you see him get blown out in South Carolina? Wouldn't Rick Perry or somebody else have to leave the race in order for Romney to get blown out in South Carolina?
Yeah, and Rick Perry made some sounds like he might be getting out of the race. No announcements, but in his speech at the end of the night, he sounded like he might be. If that happens, you could have the conservative vote coalesce around Gingrich, which is probably the worst case scenario for Romney.
What could they start to coalesce around Santorum?
They could. The problem is that Santorum doesn't yet have the money that Gingrich has, so it's not clear that he's going to be able to pull himself out of the hole he's in South Carolina just on the basis of an Iowa win.
I note that nationwide, Santorum has about 6% support, but how does that change after you pull off a win in Iowa, or a near win?
Well, he'll definitely get a second look. The question is, though, whether he'll have the money to counteract the ad barrage from Romney and his super PAC, and it's just not going to come in quickly enough, I don't think, to get anything up and running in South Carolina.
Talking with Sean Trende, senior elections analyst for RealClearPolitics and author of the new book, The Lost Majority. So really, the way I look at it, though, for Romney last night, it was great because he won. Granted, it was a tie, won by 8 votes, but it was Santorum who he was tied with and not Gingrich, which means that Gingrich probably isn't going to go away, so he'll still be in South Carolina, and Santorum and Gingrich will fight it out for those true conservative votes. So this works out very well for Romney. I mean, he's getting all the breaks in this whole process.
He really is. I mean, even going back to the candidates that didn't get into the race in the first place. But your analysis is sound. I mean, this is aside from if Perry stays in, it's exactly the result that Romney would want. He would want Ron Paul and Santorum to be the ones who win place and show.
There's been some talk about Romney coming in a tiny bit under his 2008 figure. He's sort of nominally been in Iowa for several years, but he wasn't throwing a lot of money there until the last couple of weeks. Does it make a difference that he's about at the same level? Is that a bad sign? Is it fair to Midland?
Fair to Midland, I'd say. He came in 6 votes below where he was in 2008. It's a weaker field, so on the one hand, you'd expect him to do better. On the other hand, he didn't, like you said, he didn't try nearly as hard. Last time he tried to take the Santorum route of living in the state and came up short. So I think it's a mixed bag for him.
What about Ron Paul? I mean, Ron Paul is sort of the wild card factor here because if he were to choose to run as a third-party candidate, which is something I don't think he's fully ruled out, then it changes things. But, I mean, is this the high water mark in Iowa for Ron Paul and his supporters?
No, I think Ron Paul showed what a candidate like Paul can do in a caucus state where there's, not as many voters. When you get to a lot of these western caucus states, places like Colorado and Wyoming where only 1,000, 2,000 people are actually going to caucus, his voters really could push him to some victories. Will he win the nomination? No, but he can probably bring a whole lot of delegates to the convention.
Can we touch on that, on the delegates? Because obviously that's a huge component of the way things are. It's different from previous years. How many delegates does Romney, did he even get any last night?
They're not binding.
They're not binding, right?
Binding.
Right.
So how does that work, Sean?
I'm not sure anyone really knows.
Right.
Well, thank you for that honest answer.
Yeah, no, I think there are 28 delegates theoretically at stake, and you get people at the precinct caucuses that then go on to represent you at the county caucuses that then represent you at the state convention in June, which is when the final delegates are awarded. So things can happen between now and June. Of course, the race will theoretically be wrapped up by then, so I don't think it'll matter that much.
But to Mary Catherine's point earlier in our show, which was, hey, if you can just hang on past these 4 elections, past Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Florida,
and scrape up a few delegates
along the way, just hang in there and see what happens, come February and Super Tuesday in March. I mean, is that a possibility?
Yeah, again, the question is money, though, because if you start losing those races, first, you look like a loser and the media treats you like one, and second, you can't really convince donors to write you $2,000 checks if you haven't won a race. Right. That's the real story.
Are donors getting tired of the new flavor of the week every couple of weeks? I mean, is there enough money out there for someone like Santorum to raise in the next couple of weeks in order to actually, get in this thing and be a real, thorn in Romney's side?
Yeah, again, that's Santorum's real problem is that, he'll have raised profile. He'll have some more money coming in. He said his fundraising tripled in the last few weeks, but again, if that's going from 100,000 to 300,000, that's just not going to get it done.
Is there, some people have tossed around the idea of Mitt Romney putting out VP ideas to sort of make conservatives more happy with his campaign. Is there a scenario in which that could help him?
I think you're going to hear him talking a lot about vice presidential candidates. You're going to hear him talking a lot about some of the more conservative ideas he has for his administration. At the end of the day, conservatives are really hoping to fall in love this time around, and there just isn't really a lovable candidate for them. It's a tough situation, but at the end of the day, Romney has to make that sale.
All right, so your prediction for New Hampshire and then your prediction for South Carolina.
I think Romney is going to win big in New Hampshire. I think he'll win by 20 points, if not more. South Carolina, I'm going to punt on until we find out whether Perry's in or not. If Perry stays in, Romney could win there. If he doesn't stay in, then I think Gingrich has a very good chance.
So you don't think Newt Gingrich is done because he really took a pummeling in Iowa?
He did, but he sure, of all the concession speeches last night, his was we're the Howard Dean, we're going on.
Yeah, he wants a fight. He wants to even the score, doesn't he?
That's right. He is furious at Mitt Romney. I've never heard a concession speech quite like that. So I think he's going to take a few swings before he goes down.
All right. Well, Sean, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your assessment.